Hi everyone. I want to show you how to make pie. Now anyone who knows me knows I love pie. I love pie so much that I would eat it all the time if I could. For me, pie is all about the pastry, and I want to show you how to make it correctly. And I really believe that the only way to do that is to do a video so I can show you exactly what it should look like every step of the way. Now, a lot of people think that the easy way to make pie is to make a crumble or a crisp. These are not true pie people because, as any true pie person will tell you, a crisp or a crumble, while very tasty, is not pie. Pie must have pastry, and as far as I'm concerned, I'd rather have the pastry than the filling. The filling just flavors the pastry, and I've often said that if you put pastry on dog food, I'd probably eat it. On that note, I would like to show you a little bit about flour because the flour that you use to make the pastry is critical to how the pastry comes out. So for all pastries, especially the kind that I'm going to show you today, we want to use what's known as cake and pastry flour. It's also known as soft flour. And all-purpose flour, which most people are familiar with, is hard flour. So is whole wheat, unless it's whole wheat cake and pastry flour. So what I have here is I have some all-purpose, and I have some whole spelt, and I have some light spelt. And spelt is soft, but all-purpose, as I said, is hard. And the way you can tell is all you have to do is squeeze it. And if you squeeze it with your hands, you see that the all-purpose falls apart. But when I squeeze the light spelt, and this would be the same if it was wheat cake and pastry flour, it holds together. See how nicely it holds together? And the same is true with the whole spelt. So it holds together. And that's how you can tell soft flour from hard flour. Why do you need to know this? Well, maybe you want to try different flours and you just want to know how they're going to work in a pastry recipe. Well, you need to know if the flour is soft or hard because you want to use soft flour. Okay, so let's put the pastry together now. All right, so we're going to make a version of a pastry recipe I have in my book, A Pastry Queen Goes Green, which you can get on Amazon. And all the recipes in here are using whole grain. There's even a gluten-free section, and it talks all about how to do gluten-free baking if that's what you need to do. Plus, it has all kinds of cakes, muffins, cookies, whatever you want is in there. And what's in there that's really great is a substitution chart, both for white sugar and white flour. And so even though I'm using these two flours, which I'll discuss in a minute, you can use any flours as you see fit as long as you understand how to substitute. Now, I did mention that pastry must be made with soft flour to be ideal. I have made it out of all-purpose. I just know how to adjust it. But I still think the texture is best when you use soft flour. And what we're going to use today is a cup of light spelt and a cup of whole spelt. And the reason I'm doing 50-50, I used to do it 100% whole spelt, and I liked it, but my family didn't like it as much. So I opted for the 50-50 because I just find that what works best for everyone. And this will make it easier to roll as well. You'll find that using the white flours does make it more pliable and less prone to breakage, and it's just easier to roll. Okay, so we've got our cup of each of the two flours. We're going to use 6 ounces or 3/4 of a cup of butter cut into cubes, and it's nice cold butter. It must be cold. I have 2 teaspoons approximately of room temperature coconut oil. I'm going to use 1 egg yolk, even though I still have it in the whole egg. I'm going to show you how to separate the egg, but I'm only going to use the egg yolk. And a pinch of salt, plus about 2 tablespoons of water. And that's about all there is to it. So here we go. First thing you do is you put your flour into, just get this out of the way, the food processor. And I'm using a food processor on purpose because this is the best way to do it. If you use a mixer, you're going to add air into the pastry, and you will also possibly toughen it up because of the gluten in the flour. So you don't want to use a mixer. However, what we're going to do, we're going to put in our coconut oil and we're going to put in our butter, break it up a bit, and we're going to add our pinch of salt. We're just going to process these together. We're not putting the liquid in the food processor. So the thing here, and this is what will make or break your pastry, is how fine you process this. So this is not processed enough. You can see you still have little chunks of butter. And your goal here is to process it enough that you don't have the chunks of butter, but it's not starting to bind together. You can over-process it, so you have to be very, very careful. This is also why we're going to mix the liquids in by hand, because if we process this to the right degree and then added the liquids into the processor, we would be over-processed by the time we were done. So this is not done yet, so you can see there's a nice big chunk of butter. Okay, so it's not done. So now we are going to now as you get closer, so we're getting closer, but it's still got fairly, visible sizes of, visible pieces of butter. What you can do as you get closer is just start pulsing. What the pulsing does is it allows you to see how it's getting smaller until you get it to where so you can get it to where you want it to be. Okay. Now if we look at it, you can see it looks just like, almost like breadcrumbs. So that's where you want it to be. You can also see that if you squeeze it, it holds together. And that's the sign that you've cut the butter enough into the flour that you're going to be able to have a good flaky pastry. All right. So we've transferred our flour butter mixture into a separate bowl. Now we're going to separate the eggs, and you'll notice I haven't washed my hands because I'm going to be sticking my hands in there, so there's no point in washing it right now. So we're just going to crack the egg, and we're going to take off the shell like that. And as you can see, I'm doing this over the dish, and as most of the egg white has already fallen out. Now I'm just going to transfer that to the other side, transfer it back again, and each time I get more and more egg white off. And now here I have just the egg yolk. So I'm going to put that in this little dish. I'm going to add my 2 tablespoons of water. Now water is critical for giving pastry stability, to make it strong enough so that it doesn't just fall apart when you touch it when it's baked. However, if you have too much water, it will make it tough. So I'm going to add the 2 tablespoons. If I want to add a 3rd tablespoon, I can, but I always add the first 2 just to see what kind of texture I'm getting, and then I can decide whether or not I add extra. I'm just going to add maybe half a tablespoon more, just to get some of the stuff at the bottom. And as you can see, I'm squeezing this with my hand. I'm not kneading it. Never do this action with pastry because that will stretch the gluten and that will make it tough. But you can squeeze it all you like. You can hit it, you can squeeze it, doesn't matter. Just want to get it all into a nice ball. Now, if you're an experienced pastry roller, you could roll it now, but I'm going to suggest for most people that after you get it together, so now here it is all together, that you put this into the fridge and let it rest for about 30 minutes. It'll just roll more easily. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to let this rest for 30 minutes. Now to rest it, we're going to cover it. You can just cover it with a plate like this and put that in the fridge if you have the space, or you can take this out and you can wrap it with saran wrap and stick it in the fridge. It doesn't matter. We're just going to do this. And the other thing, if you are not ready to do this right away, you wanted to make the pastry up ahead of time, you could. But what you're going to do is just leave it in the fridge overnight. Anything after that, you need to put the pastry in the freezer. So I've done this many ways where I've rolled it out and put it into the container that I'm going to use, which is kind of problematic in a bit, but I used to do that professionally when we made pies. We would make up the pie shells. We were using aluminum foil, so it was no biggie to freeze those already made, so you can do that. Normally what I do is I make the pastry fresh and just use it because it doesn't take long to make, as you just saw. However, if I was going to do this ahead, I might do it up a day ahead of time and then just bring it out and let it come up to room temperature and then roll it. So we're just going to leave this in the fridge for about 30 minutes. All right, we're ready to roll the pastry now. So we've let it rest and now we can turn this into a pie. So I've got two options for rolling pins here. Here's my heavy duty rolling pin. I have had this for many, many years. This is actually a professional one. I hardly ever use it because it's too big, and you look how much counter space you need for this. It's quite unwieldy, but hey, it works like a charm if that's what you have, or if you have a smaller version of this, that's fine. This is what I typically use, is my little wooden dowel. So this came from a hardware store, and you just buy a piece of wood like this, and then somebody rounded out the edges for me, and then you can season it with vegetable oil, usually sunflower oil or something like that. Over time, it just naturally darkens because I'm always using it with something with fat in it, and it just keeps really nice. I've had this for, I can't even tell you, 20 years, and it works like a charm. So that's what we're going to use. All right, so I also have my pie plate here, and I always use glass or a hard metal. I don't use aluminum because it doesn't cook the bottom as well. It doesn't give as much of a, aluminum doesn't heat up as well as glass or other metals do. So this delivers more heat to the bottom. It'll cook better, and that's critical to having a nice flaky bottom. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is take some of the pastry, and you'll get a feel for how much you need to do a pie, and we're just going to sort of moil it a bit so that we can roll this out flat. And we're going to lightly flour the surface of our counter. We're going to put a little bit on the dowel, and then we're going to roll. And when you roll, you always lift and turn because you want to make sure it's not sticking on the bottom. And if it starts to stick on the bottom, then you add more flour. Now when it does this, there's a little hole in there, you repair it. Lift this up. See, there's no flour there anymore, so you just put a bit more down, a little bit more here. Some people are anti-flour because they think that's going to make the pastry tougher, but we have so much fat in here that's not possible. And you see how that just stuck like that? That shows you need a little bit more on top. And you just keep rolling until you get it to a thickness that you like. There's another little tear, so we're just going to repair that. Move that. You do not want this too thick, because if it's too thick, then it tastes tough, and you don't want it too thin, because then it'll be too fragile. And you really need to experiment and get the feel for this, but this isn't even, it's barely 1/8 of an inch. Okay, and one of the reasons it's cracking like this is because of the whole grain flour. If you're finding that you're having trouble repairing it, then you can take a little piece like that, and you just mush it in. And you just mush that in like that. And once again, you want to make sure this moves. See, so it's sort of a little stuck here, so you just want to make sure it moves. Okay, just flatten that out. Okay, and now we're ready to cut out, and you want to have this at least bigger than the edge of the pie. So if you don't think you have quite enough, you can just roll it a bit more. Make sure it's not sticking. Okay. And you don't need to have a lot of excess. Now this is a hard one to do because it has these little things here. So we're not going to go around the whole thing. So we're just going to basically do about 1/2 inch in excess, and it doesn't have to be perfect. And we're going to take away the excess. And then what we can do here, because we have those handles there, we can just take off the extra there. So it's more of a circle. And don't worry about stuff like that, because we're going to fold that under to make our pie shell. And then what you do is you fold this in half, bring the pie plate over, take that little extra piece of pastry, and you unfold it into the pie shell. Okay? You can see there's a bit of a crack there, so you just repair it. Now, if you were going to be making a single pie crust, then you're going to fold this over like this. So this would be good for things like banana cream pie or lemon meringue or pumpkin pie. This is exactly what I do for pumpkin pie. If you feel you don't have enough, you stick a little piece of pastry underneath like that, okay, and then you just fold it. So you can always add, if you haven't cut it just right, you can always add. Because there's so much fat in here, it repairs very nicely. And then once you have your lip, and again, you don't want your lip to be too thick either because that'll be tough. That's why I don't have a lot of excess pastry. So probably if you've seen other demonstrations, they have a lot more extra pastry. Don't do that, this will just be tough. And now you're ready to make your crimp. Now one easy way to make a crimp is like this, where you put your finger in like that and you just pinch it. And it gives you a nice little point. Like that. But that's not how I do my crimps. This is how my mother showed me. So you just take your thumb and your second finger and you twist it and you put your finger like that. So you take your thumb, you twist it, and you push it like that. Take your thumb, push it. And it gives it, I find, see how it's kind of, this gives it a nicer edge, I think, than the pointy kind. Twist, twist, twist. Now, my mother, as I said, showed me that. She has no recollection of having done that because when I asked her about it years ago, she says, I never made my pies like that. She did. That's how I learned this. But that just goes to show you that techniques can be passed down through the ages, and I'm sure if you talk to your family members, they would have some great stories and things to teach you, especially if they are pie bakers. Now, if you're doing a double crust pie, then of course you're not going to pinch it, and we're going to make an apple pie, so we're not going to pinch it. So we're just going to take that back out again. You can see there's a bit of a crack there. Again, it doesn't matter because you can just push it back together. All right, so in order to do a double crust pie, you need to roll a top. And this is where you want to be, have a nice top. It's going to be at least as big as the surface of the pie. And if you have these extra scraps, you never re-roll pastry because it'll make it tough, but you can take the scraps and fold it in to fresh pastry if you like, because you don't want to waste anything. And what I do, I will never do more than 30%. So 30% scrap and 60 to 70% fresh. All right, so we're just going to roll out our top, and we're going to do exactly the same thing as we did before. We're always lifting and turning. Getting a nice smooth top, no cracks. Okay, and you just want to make sure your surface is at least wider than the pie. Again, you're going to take a lot of the excess off, so it doesn't have to be perfect. And some people will take a pie plate and then, cut so that they have extra there. So I'm going around again like I did before. You don't have to. You will get a feel for this and you'll be able to take off the amount that you like. Does not really matter. There's our top ready to go onto the pie. So we're just going to put that aside while we prepare the filling. All right, so now we can prepare our apples for the pie. And I just want to talk to you briefly about apples. I always use Granny Smith because they have the right amount of hardness and sour taste to make a good tasting pie. You don't want to use a really sweet apple because it just doesn't taste very good when you add the sugar. And if I had my first choice, I would choose Northern Spy, but they're hard to find and hard to get. But if you can get them, they're great, they're fabulous. They are by far the best apple for pies, but my second choice would be Granny Smith. Other options are Cortland or Ida Reds. They can make a really good pie too, but they're not as good as the Grannies or the Northern Spies. And I just also wanted to show you, so you can see on this particular Granny that it's starting to get a red color there. That means it's not the freshest Granny Smith you could buy. It means it's probably been sitting in the store, in storage somewhere for a while, probably at room temperature. So you really do want one that's green all over. Don't worry about pock marks on it or anything like that because we're going to peel this anyway. You don't have to peel this. You could bake it with the skins on. That would be great. You'd get more fiber. And if you want to do that, I do find that these do bake nicely even with the skins on. The other thing that you could do is if you do peel them, you could save the skin, throw it in the freezer, and then toss it into your smoothies for extra fiber. The pectin fiber that's in apples is just a really good fiber. So there's not much to this, and I basically peel all my apples by hand because I just find it faster. And so you need a good peeler, and you just want to take off the peel. And if you have a good peeler, this doesn't take any time at all. And then I just go around the bottom. And I go around the top, and I don't even worry about that tag. I just take it off with the peeler. Then I take a paring knife. So a paring knife is best, a small little guy like this. And I cut it in half. Then I cut it in quarters. And this is why the paring knife is so nice. You can just take out the core gently with the paring knife. Get that little extra bit there. And then I slice it into the bowl. Now some people might use an apple core. I don't bother. I just cut it out and slice. All right, so I'm going to finish that off camera and then we'll be back to put the pie together. So here are all the apples peeled. I used 4 apples because these were very large Grannies. You might need 5. And so now we're going to add the sugar, and I'm using yellow brown sugar. I really like yellow sugar or brown sugar, doesn't really matter. And for those of you who think that yellow sugar or brown sugar is just white sugar with molasses added, that is incorrect. It is made as part of the process as they're refining the sugar. They pull out the brown at a certain level and then they continue and then they pull out the yellow brown and then finally they will continue until there's no molasses left. So what's making the brown sugar and yellow brown sugar dark is molasses. And so this actually has quite a bit of nutrients in it, vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients. So this is why I prefer it. You could also use sucanat. I just find this melts better, so it's easier to make a filling. All right. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take a bowl and we're going to put our yellow sugar into the bowl. And then what we're going to do is add some flour. I've got some all-purpose flour here, and you can add a couple tablespoons, up to 3 max. It depends how juicy the fruit is or the apples are. You could also use whole spelt. I've made pies with using whole spelt for years. Now we're going to add some cinnamon, and I'm going to put in a nice heaping teaspoon of cinnamon there. And then what I like to add is nutmeg. And I discovered this by accident. So I reached for the cinnamon once and I hit the nutmeg, and I put in the same amount of nutmeg I would typically put in for cinnamon. And then I'm like, now what do I do? Do I throw it all out? Do I start again? And I thought, no, I'm just going to add some cinnamon in. And I did that, and I actually found I like the pie with the extra nutmeg in it. It tastes really, really good. You don't have to do that. You can use all cinnamon. It doesn't really matter. So you're just going to mix this up together. And then you're going to put it on the apples. You're going to mix it so that all the apples get covered. And now you're going to add it to the pie. And you want to make sure it gets distributed well. Remember, the apples are all going to shrink. So it's okay that it's coming above the rim of the pie. It's probably not going to stay that way once they're baked. Just put all these apples in. Make sure you get it fairly consistent around the whole pie. We've got some extra sugar there, so you can just sprinkle that on top. And now we're going to put our lid on. So the key here is you want to make sure that you gently press this so that as this bakes and as the apples go down, the pastry is going to go down with it to a fair degree. It's not going to be perfect, but you just want to make sure that you are sort of encouraging the pastry to go down with the apples, and then you won't have a big gap. And as you can see, we have extra pastry here. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold that under to make our lid. There, so we're going to make this lip here. And this prevents juices from seeping out. I'm just going to go around when I do that. All the way around, we're making sure we're getting it under the bottom crust. This one doesn't want to go under. Okay. All nicely in there. And now I'm squeezing this so that it's a bit thinner. I don't want it too thick. And you got to watch out for fingernails because they put holes in things and there'll be a little bit of leakage of filling there, but that's okay. And we're just going to do our crimp just like we did it before. Okay, and because there is going to be steam building up inside, we're just going to take our knife and we're going to put a cut through the middle, and then we're just going to do some slashes on the side, and that'll let the steam out. Now if you want, You could put an egg wash on this. I generally do not because, first of all, the pastry is made of butter, so that colors it. And this also has whole grain in it, which also gives it color. So I don't really find you need an egg wash. An egg wash is usually for, you have that pasty looking white flour. It gives it more color. So I don't egg wash. And this is ready to go into the oven. What we're going to do is we're going to bake this at 400 degrees for about 20 minutes, depends on the oven, until the outer pie crust is cooked. You're going to see it looks nice and baked and flaky. And then we lower the temperature. I usually lower mine to 325, but you can lower it to 350. It depends again on how hot your oven is. And you bake it for another 25 to 30 minutes to cook the filling. So that's what we're going to do next. So here we are after about 20 minutes. Probably it was closer to 23, 24. Again, it's going to depend on the oven. And as you can see, it's coloring here, it's coloring here. So you've got a nice little golden color going on here. You can also see the texture has changed. We've got, you can tell that it's flaky. I don't want to damage it, so I'm not going to poke it at this time. And so now what we're going to do is put it back in the oven. We're lowering the temperature to 325, as I mentioned, and we're going to cook it until the filling is cooked, which is going to take another 20, 25, maybe 30 minutes, depending again on the oven. Okay, so here's our finished pie, and as you can see, there's a little bubble blooping there. You can see that the goo inside is thick. Well, that means that the pie is done, and that means that the apples are soft, and the sugar flour mixture with the juice has sort of coagulated together, so that when you cut this, you don't have liquid running out. So so this is why it doesn't matter if you have holes, because this actually helps you see when it's done, when you have a little bit of leakage from the filling coming out here at the edge. And so that's what you're looking for. So there is our finished pie. Now if you want to serve this, you can use whipping cream if you like. I have a great recipe in my book for creme à la vanille, and I'm going to post it on the website. There's also, if you have dairy issues, you can use your favorite, like coconut ice cream or something like that, or you can make the creme à la vanille with coconut milk. So there's lots of options to serve with pie. I also like to serve it with cheese. Somebody actually told me recently they'd never heard of that, but that's a very common thing to serve with apple pie is cheese. And there's many ways to have this in a delicious fashion. So I hope you give this a try. If you can master pastry, you will be a star and you'll be very, very happy.